AM 1280, Newstalk KIT, 844 Tuesday. As we roll into October, that means blink and you'll be voting. And so between the first and the link, we've got our candidate interviews to bring to you. And we've enjoyed the conversations that we've had so far. And more continue. We've got a county commissioner candidate.
That's right, Dave.
Open seat, which makes it anybody's ball game, right?
That's right. Yeah, we have Yakima County Commissioner candidate Susan Soto Palmer in the house this morning. Good morning, Susan.
Good morning.
Morning, Susan. Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So there we are, the county spread out before you. And now it is the whole county. It's not just the district this time. You're talking to everybody. Spreading out the campaign more than just the folks the first time around?
That's correct. We're working, need to double up in the 14th legislative district, so parts of the Yakima County. So now we are spreading ourselves pretty thin throughout the county.
I was going to say, it's tough enough when you're doing a district on a countywide race, and now you have to add the rest of the other two districts. It's a full load. What have you learned about yourself in the political process at this point?
I've learned that I have more energy than I thought, that I have a lot more to learn from community. That community is so important, and there's so many voices. And the other thing I've learned is that most people want to talk once you start talking to them about, what's going on in your life, what things are you concerned about. Most of the time you'll get the, everything's good, and then I'll press a little bit more. Well, what about, how's safety? What do you think about safety? And then we'll get into a good conversation about what's going on with safety concerns in their minds and so forth.
Well, we do have a sheriff up for election. What are you hearing about safety?
I'm hearing that people are concerned about safety. There's what I hear is people are concerned about not enough sheriffs in the lower valley, not enough officers down in that area. People are concerned about EMS and fire safety. And an example is I was in Granger last weekend, and I was talking to people about, it's been really hard to find your home. You're on my map, but it's been really hard because I don't see any street signs. It's hard to know whether I'm on the right east or west. And I asked them, what do you feel about if you have a fire or medical emergency?
Oh, wow,
And they're telling me,
lots of luck, huh?
Even UPS can't find me,
Oh, jeez.
And so there's concerns for their safety. They hadn't thought about beyond UPS not being able to find them. So when I asked them, well, what about fire, EMS? And they're like, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. So there's a lot of issues out there that people are really concerned about.
Interesting. Go ahead, Lyle.
No, I was just going to say, Susan, tell us who you are, just in kind of in a nutshell. Who is Susan Soto Palmer?
So my name, again, is Susan Soto Palmer. I am 48 years old. I've been in the legal business for over 24 years. I am the mother of a 27-year-old young adult who has mental health challenges. And, I've been out in the community working with this community, Yakima in particular. Since 2013, I've been a community advocate trying to listen to communities' voices and do things like testify before city council or meet with state representatives on issues that matter to community. So I've been a busy person and wear tons of hats. I'm also involved in the Democratic State Party, learning to write resolutions and policy to take up to our party members and to develop our platform and those things that we believe in as party members. So I've been a really busy person since I became politically engaged and involved in 2013.
Well, let me ask you this. From an active Democrat's perspective, Eastern Washington, predominantly Republican for the last 10, 20 years, 20, 30 years maybe. I don't know. I think I was here when we had some Democrats in office, but that was like 32 years ago.
A long time ago.
When you talk about developing a platform, what goes into that? And, how do you define the differences between the typical Eastern Washington Republican voter that you're going to have to win some of in order to get elected, just because the breakdown in the numbers is just the way it is. So what are you putting out there that will, the national divide couldn't be clear, left, right, I love elephants, I hate donkeys, vice versa. So what do you put out in a platform and in your approach that you hope will encourage people to give your points of view a shot?
Well, ultimately, most people that are not involved in political parties don't even know that the party system has platforms, even at a local level. So are you targeting people that have not been politically involved to this point, and that's where you think the difference in the numbers might come from? Absolutely. Yeah. There are people that have not been engaged or involved, and ultimately, when you run for office, it would be my hope as a public servant that you're running to improve the lives of people. So when we look at the decades of work, there's been a lot of work, and I thank everybody that's in public office, because it's a difficult position, one, to be a candidate, two, to sit in office. I hear that from friends that are in office, and I'm sure, Dave, you yourself know that's been a difficult position to be in sometimes. But ultimately, we want to improve people's lives. That's why we run. That's why we put ourselves out there. So those are the things that I run for, is what can I do to help people in our community have better lives, to not be afraid of not having enough public safety, to go ahead and say, hey, we need better infrastructure. We need our businesses protected, but we also need to bring in businesses that are going to keep our children here at home, because that's another thing that I hear at the door. We want our children to come back after college, but we need the types of jobs and that will give income to our children that they'll want to stay and build their lives here. I hear about affordable housing, not just starter homes, not just people wanting to move from a starter home to the second highest home, but people that can't even afford rental homes. I've talked to several people that are so afraid they're going to lose their rental homes. They don't have the first month, the last month, and the deposit. And most of our rentals, a lot of times, I've been looking for over 2 years, the rental homes are usually $1,000 and above. So unless you're willing to take on roommates, that's not feasible for many in our community, for a lot in our community. When I talk to people that do not have homes, what they tell me, which is very sad, is that we're no longer seen as human beings. So those are issues that we need to resolve. We have a homeless crisis. We need to figure out what the correct answer is to solve some of these problems, instead of pretending that the issue doesn't exist, or it's an afterthought, or we're going to let someone else handle that problem. These are human beings with issues and problems. So,
Susan, do you sense that this office is a partisan office or a nonpartisan office? I mean, do you get that sense from anybody that says, I want a Republican in that seat, or a Democrat in that seat?
Actually, people just want someone in that office that's going to pay attention to the problems and get them solved. I think in any office, really what it comes down to, regardless of the R or the D or maybe independent or any other label you want to place on yourself, it's mainly, will you go in there and will you shine a light to these issues, and not just say, I want to get in there because the pay is so high, or because it's prestige, or because it's power. People want people in office that are going to look at the problems that we're having and then try to find solutions. Do I have the answer for every problem there is? Absolutely no, I don't. It's going to involve community. And I think that's part of what's been lacking with our county commissioner's office, is more public needs to be involved in what decision-making process is, and how do we solve some of our issues of water, of protecting, cleaning up our water in the lower valley, protecting the water resources that we have, of public safety. How many more sheriffs do we need, and where do we find the money for that? Of making sure infrastructure is secure and not wearing. Where can we find money for that? Of protecting our veterans so we don't have veterans in our streets. How can we find more funding to give the veteran services more money so it could do the job it's there to do? of making sure our homeless are not in the streets, because not only are people being affected because they have no homes, and oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but as a human being, it hurts me to see people in our streets diving through dumpsters to find food to eat. But on the other hand, I know that sometimes people that are homeless are desperate, and what will happen is that there will be, businesses that are affected by people that are in the streets. And so I also care about the businesses being protected, that they're not tagged, or that people aren't doing things outside their business that, is destructive to their businesses. So where's that balance, and how can we find it as a community together? That's what makes a difference. That's what people want to see. I've talked to Republicans, I've talked to Democrats at the door, I've talked to people that aren't politically engaged, and once we start talking about these issues, they're like, right on, I get you, right. I'll vote. And those are wonderful things to hear. So
do you think you'll bring a different perspective as a woman to the commission? It's been really dominated by men for quite some time, and I don't mean that as a sexist. I mean, it's really been dominated by men. I mean, do you bring a different philosophy? Does a woman bring a different philosophy to the commission?
I believe that I will bring a different philosophy, because I have been talking to people from all walks of life, and I am hearing their concerns. And one of the reasons I ran, and one of the things on my platform, is that I would like our county commissioners to be more engaged with the public. An example is the state of the county that the commissioners held with the Greater Chamber of Commerce, where they presented their priorities to the Greater Chamber of Commerce on June 11th of this year. Our public has not had that same opportunity to hear that platform and engage with our county commissioners to talk about these issues, and whether do these priorities fit with community, and going up and down the valley to make sure that other city governments are involved in this process. Are they collaborating with the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation? Because they are on, their land is here, and Yakima County incorporates that. So having those conversations, yes, it's important. We need to be out there. We cannot just shelter ourselves with business meetings, business people, and so forth. We need to also reach out to community, because they feel left out.
Sounds like you're making more work for your fellow commissioners, and justifiably so.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The pay is, from what I saw, over $100,000 per year. So, when the median income in Yakima is about $38,000 to $41,000, that's a lot higher. We should be able to solve those problems at that pay.
Gotcha. All right. We've asked all the other candidates a little bit about the initiatives that are out there, because that kind of gives us a sense of philosophically where you're coming from. Lance, you have the best command of all of that.
You do it. Initiative 1631, that's it's the carbon tax, the pollution tax. Where do you sit on that one, Susan?
On 1631, again, this is an initiative. If you're asking me personally, I do agree with 1631. I think that we need to start, one of my platform issues is also making sure that we develop a climate action plan specifically for Yakima. If we have wildfires in a drought, what are we going to do? So we do need to start thinking about that, and how, and this particular initiative could provide resources for that, to fund that kind of plan.
Initiative 1639, placing restrictions on guns, increased background checks, some requirements to store weapons.
Correct. I also agree with that, and the reason I do is because I am not for taking anyone's guns. I come from a family of hunters in Texas. We owned a ranch. So for people that want to say, well, you're a gun grabber. No, absolutely I'm not. But let me tell you something. As a mother of a 27-year-old who was challenged with mental health issues throughout his life and still is, if you had asked me if I had purchased a gun through my lifetime, first of all, I never did. And the reason is because if my son would have been able to grab that gun at any point in time, if I had not secured it properly, or even if I had and he could get into it. So I, as a single mom, decided that's not for me. My son should not have those because of his rage. Now, he's come a long way from youth to now, but still, those are things that, as a mother, I have to respect that people want to be kept safe. So that's why this issue is important to me, and why I ask people to look at it closely.
Initiative 940, the police officer training, de-escalation training called for in our state.
Absolutely, we need to train our police officers, especially, like I said, with not only mental health issues but people with addictions. So let's be kinder to people. Sometimes they're not in the right state of mind, and again, as a mother, especially in Texas with zero tolerance in that police force, it was a scary thing to have to call police officers not knowing what was going to happen if my son said something that was out of line. And I'm not talking about did something out of line. I'm talking about if he said something